From the Weston A. Price Foundation, welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health. And now here is our host and producer, Hilda Labrada Gore.
Hey, Hilda here. You know something's wrong. Your body is sending you signals that something's off. Your hair is falling out, you're depressed, fatigued, anxious, maybe your back is hurting. You may have heard that emotional trauma could be at the root of what's happening in your body. But this doesn't mean that you simply address the emotional hurts for healing. Our guest today suggests that you must deal actually with the physical body to heal on all the levels. This is episode 524, and our guests today are Adam and Josh Bigelsen, the Bigelsen brothers, who started the Bigelsen Academy, continuing the work of their father, Harvey Bigelsen, who wrote the book Holographic Blood and Doctors Are More Harmful Than Germs. We are building today on episode 523, by the way. You may want to go back and listen to the previous podcast so that you can get a framework for today's conversation. Today, Adam and Josh touch on blood, but we go beyond blood, diving into what they call true integrative holistic medicine. In other words, Josh and Adam discuss how to respond to the trauma our bodies have been through and the importance of attending to the physical in order to bring about complete healing. They cover how to interpret the body's messages about what's wrong and approaches for addressing it. They touch on the emotional roots behind cancer, rashes and hives, asthma, mononucleosis, and more. For example, you may just want to listen to this very deep episode twice. Before we get into the conversation, I want to invite you, in honor of the Weston A. Price Foundation's 25th anniversary, to join hands with us. If you have benefited from our work in any way, or you're just a fan of this podcast, now is the time to join hands and to give back to us. You can join the Weston A. Price Foundation using the code POD10 for only $30 a year. I can hardly believe it. It's such a great deal. You will not only become a member of the Weston A. Price Foundation family, but you will be entered to join a gift. You will be in a drawing for some Wise Traditions friendly swag. So go to westonaprice.org or just click on the link in the description to join hands with us in our important work of dedication, of education, research, and activism. And you just might win a little something special in exchange. Thank you in advance. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you are listening to Wise Traditions. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Josh and Adam.
Thanks for having us back.
We had to have you back because this is fascinating, mind-blowing information. And I think where we left off is we did not start to dive into the patterns that you see, the patterns of disease that the blood is willing to reveal. Can you speak to that a little bit, Adam?
Sure. This is what it's all about, actually. You know, our father observed things over long periods of time. And even when this first woman came to him that was working with him side by side and showing him the blood, it took him a year before he really believed what he was seeing. You know, this is one thing that was nice about our dad is he was very, I can't remember, Josh, left brain, right brain?
Left brain.
Yes, I'm not that guy. Very numbers oriented. You know, he was a math genius and things like this. But so it was all about patterns. Seeing things over longer periods of time. And as he did this stuff too, it was interesting because as we tried to teach some of the work at one point, Dad would say, you look at the blood, you look at your patient, you look at the blood, you look at your patient, you look at the blood, you look at your patient. And you do this for a year before you start to tell people. Like if you want to learn about the blood, you get your microscope. Not that there's any good ones these days, but you have a good day, you look at your blood. You have a bad day, you look at your blood. You hit your head, you look at your blood. So Dad saw patterns, which was really nice. And that's when he removed inconsistencies and saw what was consistent.
I did read the part in your book where your father was looking at the patient and looking at the blood and looking at the patient and looking at the blood. And by doing that, he was able to see even what their facial expressions, the way their posture was, the way all of it matched up. If their blood was tired, he could see it on their face. So I guess he became tuned in to what to look for. Is that right, Josh?
Yeah, absolutely. You really don't need the microscope to do this work. This just gives us a different view into their world. So, from what I hear, luckily I haven't had much interaction with traditional doctors, is they're not very personal anymore, personable, right? You're a clipboard, you're a number, you're a lab test, and really that's it. So, back in the day, doctors used to do house calls. At least they got to know your terrain. They got to know your family. They got to know what you were living in. And then that gave them pieces to the puzzle. So with my father, and forgive me if I repeated this, he would generally go out to greet the patient and shake their hand. And if they were sweaty, he knew they were in sympathetic mode, right? So just right off the bat, are they in fight or flight? He would follow them to the office and watch the way they walked, right? So that told him about the structure of their body at that point in time. When he took a drop of blood, he would watch the way it spread. Just that there would tell him a lot. So before he even looked at a lot of information.
A lot of clues.
Yeah, a lot of clues. And I even actually had mirrors set up so I could watch clients walk into the office. So you'd watch them come strolling up to that office door, open the door, and start limping. That there's the subconscious going on as well. So observation. Dad was observing patterns, just like the farmers who we've worked with. Don't touch your land for at least a year. Just observe it. And I think because we live in such a we need it now society that we've lost our powers of observation.
That's really true. And I'm thinking of one of my friends who was kind of a docent in a museum. And if you also run by a painting, or as they say, most people in museums who come to visit only see it for like a minute, you're not getting the full picture. And maybe in this kind of instant society, as you alluded to, Josh, we think, something hurts, but I don't have time to figure it out. I'll just pop a Tylenol, right? We just start doing everything so quickly. We're not taking time to even see what signals our body is sending us that we could pay attention to.
Right. It's a question of us being as conscious as we can be, as present as we can be, which is not easy for us. We think we're conscious and we're present. And even our history form is so funny because we have people fill out the history form. There's clues on there that are awesome for us. It's a unique history form. But then people say, oh, I forgot I had my tonsils removed. Like, is that a surgery? Oh, I forgot my kidney was removed. It's like, come on, really? But the patterns this way are very interesting. Even talking to people, we would do consultations. I talk to people. I help them to hold themselves accountable. And did I get all blurry on you guys?
You did get a little blurry, but not to the listeners who are just listening to the audio, so they won't know. But yeah, find your spot and then stick
Turn off the nerd camera, Adam.
There we go. No, it's my
I was
camera.
like, wait, my powers of observation are so keen. The man is getting blurry.
It's not clear anymore, yes. But as we do this, and I talk to people, and I say, okay, so you went and saw a practitioner. What'd you notice? Well, nothing really changed. But then I look at the history form and say, well, how's your neck? Oh, actually, my neck's doing better. Okay, and how's your digestion? Oh, yeah, my digestion's been better also. And your sleep? Huh. The reality of me talking with these people is very valuable because people go through these things and we don't even realize we've had the change. It's really amazing. We're such interesting creatures, and Josh and I are funny because we go into public and I smile at people. I make eye contact and people don't look at you very often. More in Mexico, California, they don't want to make eye contact. It's like, do I know you? It's uncomfortable. Josh and I walking down the aisle in the grocery store and there's someone, we're walking the same direction and they totally move away to the side and look. And Josh and I will even say, ignore me. Pattern interrupt, people. Okay. We want to interrupt some patterns.
I like that. Well, what's funny, you guys, just on that note, I wear hats a lot and people smile at me. And I thought, why is everyone smiling at me? And then sooner or later I realized, I kind of stand out with a hat, but I like it because it feels like we're having a good connection there. And that's good for the health too, right?
Right. Definitely. Well, and Josh and I talked about this last time, I think with me doing my silly walk in public. And as I do this walking exercise, people look at me and it's fine because if they're laughing at me, I just brought them into the moment. We're so unconscious. It's crazy, going through New York and walking through the city and everyone's on their phone and, it's amazing no one bumps into each other. But if you do, no one turns around and says they're sorry. It's really interesting observing. And even Josh and I, when we were younger, we lived in San Diego. We'd hang out on the boardwalk. And most people are, watching the girls in the bikinis, which we did. But we played this game of guess the illness. It was like, oh, she needs an osteopath.
Yeah, Dad would teach us that, how to observe people. You can see why that person has heart issues. They're going towards the Parkinson's because their arms aren't moving when they're walking. So you start to notice the actual patterns that are going on. And I like the fact that we brought up the history form because there's patterns Dad has noticed over time. And your typical history form, whether it's a traditional doctor or an alternative doctor, is a list of 1,000 symptoms. And you just have to check the boxes, right? And none of that is telling you what the cause of anything is. So Dad was always adding to the history form. He'll ask things that people didn't think was a big deal. Like, have you had bunionectomy? Right? If you had a bunionectomy, right? Bunions are there to stabilize your equilibrium. So your pelvis is off. So that's why the body creates the bunions, to stabilize your equilibrium. Right. And then they go and they cut those bunions off, and now your whole equilibrium is thrown back off again. So just the act of the body creating bunions tells us a lot about the structure of their entire body, not just the actual pelvis. Little things like that. Mononucleosis, which is actually related to your birth. We generally see that if people have had mono it's always in the teen years. And why is that, Adam? Why do people always get their mononucleosis in their teen years?
Because it's a difficult time. No, this is an awesome one too, Hilda, because this is a long-term pattern. All right. And when did Dad figure this one out, Josh? By looking at the blood, all right, observing people, he noticed things. He noticed the belly button. All right. The umbilical ligament is attached to the roof of the diaphragm and the pubic area. So when you're born in the United States, they pull on that umbilical cord and they cut it really close. So you have a pretty little belly button. You have an innie. Right? That's the medical term, I think. Well, what happens though is it pulls the diaphragm down and it pulls the pubic area up. Now they tie it, they cut it, they tie it, and now you've got scar tissue there. Scar tissue is stagnant. It's not dead, but it's not moving. So you grow up and this continues to pull the diaphragm down. This is one reason we lose our height as we get older. Okay.
Yeah, the belly button is a scar, so it's always contracting. So we go through our teen years, we're trying to get taller and taller and taller, and then umbilical ligament starts to pull the diaphragm down in the liver, and the liver backs up, and this is what they call mononucleosis. So it tells us a lot about their birth. So if they had mono, then you knew that birth was a little bit more off physically than they thought. Emotionally, there's patterns to the birth too, but that's a story for maybe
But this is a long-term pattern, Josh. This is neat because you're born, and then 15 years later, it's like clockwork. Here comes the mononucleosis. Now, it doesn't happen with everybody because depending on which way you were intrauterine, you're going to pull different ways and things like that too. But this was a long-term pattern. And I used to have asthma. I do not anymore. I get an awesome breath. Josh would say that Dad fixed half of his soccer team when he was a kid's asthma by one treatment to the belly button.
Just stopping for a second. The belly button is a scar?
Yep, it's our birth scar.
What if it were handled differently? What if the cord were clamped and cut differently?
That's why we love midwives. Midwives generally get it. The United States, we have a very poor infant mortality rate because of the way the baby is handled. But a lot of other countries, they do take care with the baby. They'll leave 4 to 6 inches on the umbilical cord. After a week, it just naturally falls off. They're not trying to shine lights in the baby's eyes and things like that. They're trying to be quiet with the sounds because the baby's been living in this muffled silence for a long time. So midwives really, really get it. There's a great book called Birth Without Violence, which explains how most of us are traditionally born, and then it explains steps that we can take, maybe make it more a gentle introduction into this world. And then the belly button itself is a scar. Scars hold on the emotion of the trauma. So we used to do a lot of, scar treatments, but knowing when to work on those scars was paramount because you don't know what the trauma was that caused that scar in the first place. And the belly button is directly related to our birth trauma. It's directly related to our parents.
Oh my gosh, this is so fascinating.
Yeah, there's so much that can be done just by understanding the physical part of the belly button and the umbilical ligament, and then the emotional component that scars have.
Well, and the pattern here, and hold that thought, Hilda, so you don't forget it. The pattern here is in the United States, we are born into a traumatic experience. All right. It's not a happy thing for the child. So from the day we were born, we came into this world with some trauma involved. And then they do the belly button thing and then it gets locked in. All right. So we grow up and we have to deal with these things. If people come across us and we get them to do this belly button treatment, it's really interesting because how often their mother comes up. Right? And they just start crying. It's like all this emotion. I had it happen 2 weeks ago. The woman, I set people up for these treatments. I say, this is what you may have happen. And she was like, oh my God, my mother was not good to me. And when this treatment happened, she came up and the crying. And then I understood why she was the way she was and why I needed to experience that. It's like we've had people get the belly buttons treated. It's like this exorcism sometimes. It's pretty interesting.
If you do it the right way, the emotion comes out in a way that you can handle it, right? I worked with Dad for over 20 years, and it was when I stopped working with him where I saw people getting these exorcism reactions. The healing crisis is not a good thing. The healing crisis happens when the doctor doesn't know what they're doing, or they're pushing the wrong buttons, or they're being too hard with their treatment. The goal is to push the person as hard as they can underneath their aggravation level. So yeah, we would get criers, but it was this beautiful cry. It wasn't this hysteric exorcism that was going on that I saw so many times working with other practitioners. So as you treat that scar, it helps release the emotion in a very gentle.
Cathartic release. Yeah, so this is what I was going to ask you all. This is sounding a lot like German New Medicine. How does the work of your father and the idea of noticing these patterns of disease, how is it different from German New Medicine?
Yeah, German New Medicine is a small piece of what we do. And I think for the most part, they're on the right track, right? We tend to, what was brilliant about Dad is he incorporated different pieces of the puzzle so you have a complete picture. And German New Medicine, although it's based on old Eastern philosophy, has a lot of it has a very important piece of the puzzle, and that's that emotions happen and they cause physical issues. Where we tend to differ is once the emotion causes a physical issue, you have to work on the physical to release the emotional. You can't just go talk about that emotion. That's not working on the physical. So we always incorporate the body work, maybe even some breath work, maybe some Tai Chi or Qigong. You got to work on the physical to release the emotional. And that is a very big missing piece of the puzzle out there.
The physical and the emotional are intertwined, which is why you were saying the belly button is a scar and that when people treat it, they have an emotional release.
Absolutely. As well as an energetic. So it comes down to Steiner's 4 bodies. So they're all involved there.
It's very important too, the emotional experience is where we are emotional beings. Emotions affect us in a huge way. Dad's conclusions with cancer was it was 1,000% triggered emotionally. His lung cancer patients were all grief. His liver cancer patients, anger. The pancreatic cancer is the toughest. That's self-worth. All right. So the patterns even there that we saw were very interesting. Dad saw a lot of patterns. It was really neat. But the thing is, there's so many interesting modalities out there. The blood brought everything together. What we do is very complementary to things that really do work. There are things that don't really work, and those people don't really like us because the blood doesn't change when they do certain things, right? But you can have an emotionally traumatic episode and you can go to your therapist for years and talk about it, or you can get on that massage table and one day you just start crying because the massage therapist is helping you to physically release the emotions. So if your therapist worked with a craniosacral person, your therapist's job would be a lot easier.
And I guess this is why, Adam, you said before that you're not saying everyone needs to come to you all to get their blood analyzed, blah, 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 because you understand these things are intertwined. Disease is caused by many factors, and it doesn't have to be just one approach to healing.
Yes, there are different roads to the same place, but we definitely know everything is all connected. You get a physical injury, it affects you energetically, emotionally, you get depressed, spiritually, why me? Right? You have low energy, it affects you physically, emotionally, it brings you down, spiritually, once again, am I a victim? Emotionally, when you're down, does it affect you physically? Come on. Definitely. Does it affect your energy? Does it affect you spiritually? And the last one, spiritually, if you don't believe you can be better, there's nothing we can do for you. It's all connected. This is true integrative holistic medicine.
It's a huge key. And I'll repeat it again. The emotion causes a physical issue. You have to take care of the physical to release the emotional. That is very necessary. Certain people have this great emotional tool, but they're not working on the physical. So they're not completing the puzzle. Very important.
Coming up, Adam and Josh discuss why people break out in rashes or hives. They also explain why, if we don't understand how nature works, we're just guessing at trying to fix things.
You're listening to the Wise Traditions podcast from the Weston A. Foundation. We pause now to recognize our sponsors.
Gray Toad Tallow. At Gray Toad Tallow, they believe that truly nourishing skincare begins with the finest ingredients. That's why their top priority is to source only the best 100% pastured tallow from organically raised animals. The result is a clean product with just a few ingredients, reminiscent of what past generations relied on for healthy skin. Gray Toad Tallow also strives to keep their products wholesome and affordable, making it more accessible for those seeking natural skincare solutions. So hey, they know life is busy, so let them do the work for you, transforming their suet into a tallow balm that your skin will love. Cherished for generations, Tallow naturally offers a perfect blend of fats and vitamins to keep your skin healthy, hydrated, and radiant. So go to greytoadtallow.com today to explore their full range of products designed to nurture your skin from head to toe. And use the code WISE10 at checkout for 10% off your order. Again, that's greytoadtallow.com and the code WISE10 at checkout to save 10% on your order. And experience the difference that Grey Toad Tallow can make. And One Earth Health. Are you feeling run down? Struggling with focus, joint pain, or a weak immune system? You might be missing something crucial, and that is real nutrient-dense organ meats in the diet. That's where One Earth Health comes in. Their 100% New Zealand grass-fed beef organs are the most potent you'll find anywhere. And why? Because New Zealand has the highest farming standards in the world, producing organ meats with superior vitamins and minerals. One of One Earth Health's customers said that her joints felt stronger. She could climb the stairs with ease again. And her husband, he had improved digestion. And her son, he finally had the focus to power through his schoolwork. So if you want more energy, stronger joints, and sharper focus, give One Earth Health beef organs a try. Go to oneearthhealth.com and for a limited time, use the code WISE10 for 10% off your order. Again, that's oneearthhealth.com, and for a limited time, use the code WISE10 for 10% off. Fuel your body the way nature intended. One Earth Health, because quality matters. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Yeah, or vice versa. Like I have a friend who is always itchy. I don't know why. She's always itchy. And I'm not laughing. It's not really very funny. But like, whenever she showers, then these things crop up. It's like eczema. I don't even know what it is. She's also anxious. I get the feeling that these things are intertwined. But she's trying physical modalities to maybe go after an emotional issue. I'm guessing. I don't really know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it depends on what the physical modality she's doing is. But yeah, if you look at one of the wonderful things the body does is if we ingest a toxin, the body's first response is to eliminate it. So your breakouts, your rashes, they're all wonderful signs of a great, we don't call it an immune system, we call it a regulatory system. It's a wonderful regulatory system that's going on there. So if the body's continually expelling wastes from the actual body itself, you look at the areas where the waste is coming out. And that tells you a lot about where the areas got a lot of trapped stagnation. So it gives you clues what needs to be actually worked on.
And nervous rashes? Come on. How many people get nervous and they get hives and things like that?
Yeah.
Totally. There's a pattern, Hilda.
The body's always cleaning, you're breaking out in rashes. There has to be an internal frenetic energy that's going on as well. So those people are going to be a little bit antsy. Just because it's coming out of the skin, we're only seeing a part of what's going on. And there's so much going on internally that as the body's working so hard to heal, that's what's going on with her, it's a healing process, there's this frenetic energy that's going on, and that's the anxiety that she'll feel.
Yeah. So let's get back to blood, because that's your specialty and your father's specialty. I noticed that the book said the blood reveals our truths. Talk to us about how you can interpret the patterns that you detect in the blood.
That's a good one. So the blood reveals the truth. What Dad would say is there's no secrets in the blood. It's all there. Okay. If you think about things like, just in general, the cloning experience. If they cloned me, my clone technically should have my broken collarbone, should have my attitude in such a way. So this information is there, right? And that's, Dad would say, one drop of blood. It was Edgar Cayce that turned him onto this. Edgar Cayce said the physician of the future will diagnose the condition of the entire body through one drop of blood. All right. We don't diagnose, so there's that. But Dad, looking at the blood, there are certain textures that make sense with certain things. Some things are very obvious, but you have to realize that when Dad did this for years and was able to, he was brilliant. He had a lot of anatomy background. He really had a lot of experience with a lot of different things. And then as he started to look at the blood, sometimes you see this little blob in the blood and it looks amorphous. Right? But then you see the kidney, and that makes total sense. But there's a lot of patterns that have to do with the size of what we're looking at in relation to the red cells is one thing. If it's big in the blood, it's big in your body. There's simple things like that.
Did we explain actually what a hologram was last time at all?
I don't know if we did. So go for it.
You're looking at me on that one, Josh? All right. Okay. Everything in the body, all matter vibrates at different frequencies. Okay, this is stuff that we know. So aluminum versus steel, things like that, molecules moving faster or slower, right? So in the body, everything has its own frequency, its own vibration. Everything is working together. It's like this beautiful symphony. Now, if something is out of balance, dysbiosis, it changes the frequency, and we can see that visually. It's like a dissonance in music, two notes that don't really go well together. Even Josh would say like bats and dolphins. Sound, energy, things bouncing off, they're able to see images perfectly without using eyes. So holograms are made, and I'm not a physics teacher, but holograms are made by more or less bouncing light, refracting, okay, and taking a picture of a disturbance field.
Okay, yes, you did talk about this last time because it's coming back to me now. So it's like our body is sending something out and it gets something back, and it's like it hits something because something's amiss, let's say. Something has disturbed the field, like you said.
You got it. It's a disturbance field. In the body, there is a disturbance field. Something is off, okay? When we look at the blood with the microscope, like we said last time, our microscope doesn't send the light straight through the sample. It goes to the sides, it refracts. So now we have a disturbance field on the slide, and we have a microscope that is bouncing light in such a way. If you do the bright field microscopes, which are the normal microscope, light goes through the sample, you will not see any of these things. And did we say this last time? The term dark field in the United States is owned by the Center for Disease Control.
No, you didn't say that last time. What does that even mean?
Exactly. Why do they own a term, right? And here's the thing. There's a law, the CLIA law, that talks about dark field microscopy. You are not allowed to use a dark field microscope in a dark room.
What? Why?
Exactly. They have no idea what they're talking about. Why would they not want us to see these things? Because we're seeing, like Dad said in the book, the truth. We're seeing what the body wants us to see.
That law came up as when Darkfield came over here from Germany, it was starting to make some good pushes. And there were certain truths there. So they wanted to try to regulate the Darkfield practitioners, right? So if you actually use the word Darkfield, they could actually come and take your microscope because you don't own that word.
Never say that again.
Right. Well, now they don't go after the Darkfield practitioners because as a whole, the work got bastardized. And what they're doing is they're actually supplement salesmen. So, and who owns most of the supplement companies is pharmaceutical companies. So before, the truths that my father was raised in was going against their income, whereas now where the work is going in this really ridiculous way, it's actually bringing them an income because all people are doing is making these inaccurate observations so they can sell a supplement. So they're not going after these dark field people anymore like they used to go after people like my father. It's a very interesting shift that we've seen.
And we mentioned this last time, I think this is the live blood analysis experience. We analyze the blood live, but live blood analysis is a brand. It's nutritional microscopy, okay? So like Josh said, they came after us. We got in trouble. And you'll have this one, the court case, they came in, Josh was there, they came in during business hours, and they took the microscope, right? Josh, they called the police just laughed at Dad and Josh, all right? So they took the microscopes, and the deal was the medical association has nothing to do with this whole experience. But in the end, when we had to pay our fine, we had to write the check out to the medical board. And when we had to pick up our microscopes to receive them, we had to pick them up from the medical board.
Well, and of course, in the Weston A. Price Foundation here, we always are going rogue and choosing a different path than conventional medicine. And what happens is you upset the apple cart, you upset the status quo, and the people in power who are making money off the backs of sick people are threatened, right? So this is not a surprise to me. And yet, what you're talking about, it's so foreign to most of us, even in this alternative and ancestral health field, that I'm surprised that anyone would see it still as a threat.
Yeah. Well, and it was interesting too, because let me see, you just said something there that I wanted to touch on by way of, oh yes, if you read Dad's Doctors Are More Harmful Than Germs book, didn't make him a lot of friends in the medical world, right? But he really supports trauma surgeons and paramedics and the nurses. You know, he would say, don't call me Eastern or Western. I'm not alternative. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater experience. When he was working with cancer, he was working with a medical doctor. You know, the terrain was so clogged up with stuff and you've got something growing, someone's got to cut it off. And then they work with the body naturally to support the things. So we're really not here to say all doctors are stupid. And they're really, I don't blame them. They're trying to help people. I think I said this last time, maybe. Doctors want to help people. They want to drive a Porsche and golf on Wednesdays, and there's nothing wrong with that. And they were trained wrong with most of the stuff. So it's not their fault. They're trying their best. And even Dad, as a Western medicine medical doctor, was able to incorporate certain things. But it's a totally opposite approach. Things aren't getting contaminated. There's no infections and things like that. So it's another pattern that Dad saw. People just saying Western medicine is dumb. No, there's been some awesome advancements. There's something there depending on.
What do you think, Josh?
Oh, Adam has to remind me sometimes that I'm speaking in a public atmosphere. Yeah, Dad was a fully trained surgeon, and you basically use surgery as a last resort. Sometimes it's necessary, then afterwards you pick up the pieces, but you do everything you can to avoid that surgery. What we've found is with traditional medicine, and even these days with the newer age of alternative medicine, if you don't understand how nature works, then you're just guessing at trying to fix things. Right? So traditional medicine is great with their trauma care. They know absolutely nothing about chronic care. Alternative medicine is kind of going down that same path where there become a lot of green allopaths. I generally don't include acupuncture and Eastern philosophy in that. To me, that is traditional medicine. But we're also starting to see the schoolings for acupuncture here in the US change now, where they're talking about germs, they're talking about killing parasites, which goes against the very beliefs of old Eastern philosophy. So we're starting to see these shifts going on. So Dad wrote a great article back in the day called Don't Call Me Alternative. And basically his message was there is no alternative to the way nature works.
Oh, there's no alternative to the way nature works. I like that.
You know, man has tried to enforce our will on nature, and you're never going to win that game. We preach Lamarck's theory of evolution, where everything is about symbiosis, as opposed to survival of the fittest, which is combative. So yeah, for us, we're not traditional, we're not alternative, we're totally terrain-based, and, we're just here to support nature.
Is it more than just you and Adam? Like, how many people are into this dark field microscopy? How many people are looking at this blood and looking for the patterns in this way that your father established or learned about?
Well, for us, anyone with a dark field microscope at this point in time is not someone we would recommend you go to, unfortunately. Yeah, it's a sad thing for us. I'm going down to Acapulco and I'll be talking, and there's someone there going to do live blood analysis. And I'm telling these people, I'm going to be on stage talking about how this doesn't work. It's going to be very interesting. So here's the thing. And with the live blood stuff, you can take a 12-hour course right now, and then you think you know what you're doing. Okay. So the patterns, I think we includes you, okay, includes those of us that are really looking and trying to learn to make sense of what's going on. Okay. The regenerative farmers are getting these things, right? The people that are doing the permaculture. And I heard about social permaculture recently. So there are a lot of us that are looking to see this stuff. The people that we talk to that come to our courses and that join our School of Health and our webinars, they're looking. Once you hear what we say, when you read that book, you're going to start looking to support the terrain. It supports you. But the reality is, in the practitioner world, the microscopes, we don't recommend you see anybody else with a microscope. And if you have microscopes and doing live blood analysis, don't take this personally, okay? We're happy to work with you, no pressure. But you have to be open to the fact that some of what you were trained might not be right.
Josh, maybe you can tell us why it's not aligned. And I remember last time, Adam, you did say there's a distinction between live blood analysis and what we're talking about. Where has it gone awry, let's say, Josh?
Kind of when it came over here, we're not going to mention any names, but there was a person who pushed it in the United States who basically stole some work from the Germans, then made up his own conclusions with the rest of the stuff he didn't learn. So there's a lot of guesswork going on there, and there's inconsistencies. Like Adam says, people are taking a 12-week course or 12-hour course, and then they're teaching the course themselves. We've had people take a 2-hour workshop, Xerox the manual, and give that course themselves. Even dumb things like they'll have one picture up there and they think that's a representation of what's going on in your entire body, right? You have some of your cells are a few seconds old, some are up to 120 days old. So you can focus in on the older decomposing cells and say, oh, your blood looks terrible, right? Unless you're observing patterns over a long period of time, years we're talking about, you're not going to be able to observe these patterns.
Maybe it's like this. Maybe it's like a rookie detective working with the police. They come on a crime scene, they see a thing of blood, they're like, it was a stabbing, right? And so they're kind of jumping to a conclusion. Maybe one time it was a stabbing, but they haven't been on the force long enough to know that there's other stuff to look for.
Yeah, that and the conclusions, there's so much guesswork that literally you go to 10 different people and you're getting 10 different answers. And even the single most important thing we see in the blood, the microzymas, which is like your chi, your prana, your life force. You've got schools teaching that they're parasites. And it's a total bad guess, but that fits into their paradigm. That fits into their message. which is be afraid of these things. And buy the supplement, buy K22 over here. So the guessing has gotten so bad that basically we just said, we just need to be separate. We do a very basics blood course, but we don't teach you unless you go through our 13-week courses. If you don't understand the philosophy, your science is going to be garbage, right? You have to have philosophy before you can do the science.
But what about the people who are going to these folks, and are they seeing any healing, or do you feel like it's more like patchwork situation?
Well, this is the old days. These are the old days when Dad would say, well, can we open up the phone lines and have a caller calling? Let's talk to them about what they think went on. So here's the thing. Even with the antibiotics, okay, something goes on and you don't feel right. So you take an antibiotic and you feel better. But they've pushed this thing deeper into your system. So you don't feel it anymore is one thing. All right. Now, for other people, though, going to people for this type of work, you get your supplement. Now you have a natural substance that can change something. Okay. But for us, supplements don't fix things. Supplements can help you manage things. And this is what we've done. We've never sold supplements. You can be on them for a certain period of time while we go to the back of the dam and fix where things are coming from. The reality is we should not have to take supplements. So it's a different approach. It's a different thing. I feel for people because we're all looking. And there are some interesting things, like I've seen scans. People do all these neat scans. And the readouts, the printouts are ridiculous as far as the amount of information that overwhelms somebody. And then they come up with a supplement or a homeopathic, which is fine. But here's the pattern we have seen. And part of it is because of people who have reached out to us, who have had the training and then said, I've been doing this for about a year and all I'm doing is giving people supplements and they're not getting better. So what's the deal? We have trained very few people, none of which we would endorse or recommend that you go to, but that was one reason they reached out to us. So for anyone that's doing this work, if they're very conscious about what they're doing, over a period of time, they're going to realize they're never discharging someone. They're never saying, you're good, don't come back. All right.
Well, this is a good point here too, and we'll move on from the live cell thing. As far as the supplement goes, from the right practitioner, they can be very complimentary. They can be supportive. Well, we'd much rather, we're on your side there. We'd rather have you get your vitamins from your food, right? But sometimes, you need some support while you're going through it. There's a wonderful book called Nourishment by Fred Provenza. This wonderful farmer, and he talks about just observing nature. And what they found is when they would actually supplement the animal's feed, the animals stopped eating that food in nature that had that actual vitamin. It's exactly like people going to their vitamin C in the cabinet and not eating an orange. The other part of that is when they would supplement the soil, right, with additions, the plants developed very shallow roots and they stopped making mycorrhizal connections. So the way these things grow in the soil is the same way they grow in the body. We've got bacteria, we've got fungus, platelets and fibrin grow like this mycelium network in our body. Right? So if we're giving supplementation on the surface, we're inhibiting in our own body these mycorrhizal and these fungal connections that are necessary to healing.
And it's interesting too, Hilda, Josh and I, we really do our best to be as positive as we can. With our message, there's no fear when we're looking in the blood. This is information. We don't believe in good bacteria, bad bacteria. And we really don't want to just say, oh, this modality is stupid, But we feel for people at the same time. I had a friend who just reached out. He had a very comprehensive scan done, and they developed a homeopathic based on the scan, and now there's a yeast infection. And there's a question. Well, there's fungal, so there's something going on, but I want to see the scan. There's a lot of interesting information there potentially, but the reaction is kind of interesting. I need to know, as he's asking me the question, I need to know a little more information. Why did he get the scan in the first place? What's going on with him? What symptoms is he trying to alleviate? It'd be nice to look at his blood so we can really see what's going on and explain why this has happened. So I really feel for people, the people that are trying to learn things to help people and the people that are trying to get the education from going to the different practitioners. It gets confusing.
It does. And just to be fair, you said these live blood analysis people and others are finding that they're not helping people heal and chow, go take care of yourself. Now you're good to go. Are you guys able to see people heal and say chow?
Yeah, it was funny. My dad's brother was a real doctor, even though Dad was a surgeon, and they didn't get along at all. And my dad, he asked my dad, what's your cure rate? And my dad said, at least I have a cure rate. Right. So the highest goal of a physician is to discharge your client. People who saw my dad, if they were with us for 6 months, it was surprising. You get them going in the right direction, then you give them tools. after that, right? If the person wasn't getting better, Dad was taught it was his fault. So he took it very personally. You could almost always improve the quality of health. He was, even in Mexico, he had his cancer clinic. They had a 50% turnaround in stage 4 cancers alone at that point, right? But everybody's on their own journey, and all you can do is educate and help support them on their journey. So yeah, with Dad, if the patient wasn't getting better, he really took it personally, as did I, and that's the goal. Nobody want you want to be able to see your client out for dinner. You don't want to have to see them in the actual office all the time.
I love that.
So it's a process. Disease is a process, and health is a process, and there's no magic bullet, and there's no protocols for healing.
And I feel like this book, Holographic Blood, explains how disease is a process. And what we need to do, I think, is pay attention to the small signals our body is giving us so that it doesn't have to yell at us later because we weren't paying attention, right? And that might be a good place to start, even for people who don't look into this dark field microscopy. Well, I can hardly say it, but anyway, into this blood stuff.
You don't need the microscope to understand the terrain. And I think it was Ray Archuleta, who's from the Soil Health Academy. He says, if you want to make small changes, you change the way you do things. And if you want to make big changes, you change the way you see things. And what we're doing with my father's book and things like that is we're hoping it shows you how to see things a little differently. And then things start to make sense with you. Everything is not so combative. Everything is not so anti. Everything is symbiotic. So sometimes just reading that book, it's really not a blood book. It's more about the science behind it, which is great. It'll give you tools to look at things differently and take care of yourself. Our goal is to get people to take accountability for their own health, first of all. Nobody's as responsible for me being sick, right? It is totally my responsibility. But once we understand how nature works and how to work with it, then it's a much easier path for you. And it helps you observe along the way the interaction between us and nature and that we're not separate from it.
And now we have to wrap up. So I would love to ask you guys the question. I know I posed it last time, but maybe you'll have a different answer. I don't know. If the listener could just do one thing to improve their health, just one thing, maybe to collaborate more with nature, as we've been saying, what would you recommend that they do? Adam, let's start with you.
I think it was the same as last time. It's get your joy. 10 minutes of joy every day. You've earned it, you deserve it, and it's good for your health.
I love that.
It's very important. And even if we add to that, like my girlfriend would say, you want to be healthy, take off your shoes, go outside in nature and hug a tree. Not romantically, but the grounding with the earth and what's going on there and the negative ions from the tree and things like that. This is important. And enjoy your day. Dad said, if you want to be healthy and your family to be healthy, get the kids to come home for dinner, have them help you cook and set the table, ask them about their day, have them help you clean. Let's really be coherent with what's happening all around us and enjoy life, damn it.
Wonderful. What about you, Josh?
I'm along the same lines. Get out, be in nature and observe. Just sit there and observe. And one of my favorite dad quotes was, if you're too busy living and creating, you have no time to die. So go out there, be in nature, and observe the patterns. Everything in life, there's a pattern to it. Watch the way nature is working. There's the same way that we should be working as well. Work with it. Don't work against it.
Beautiful words to end on. Thank you so much, both of you. On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, it has been a pleasure.
Our pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Our guests today were Adam and Josh Bigelsen. You can visit their website, BigelsenAcademy.com, to learn more. And I am Hilda Labrador, the host and producer of this podcast on behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation. You can find me at holistichilda.com. And for the transcript for today's episode, visit our website, westonaprice.org, and click on the podcast page. And now for an Apple Podcast review from Susie Q, No Excuses. She says, keep up the good work. I appreciate the info you put out. Short and simple, Susie Q. I like it. You too can leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Just go to that site, click on ratings and reviews, give us a bunch of stars, and tell the world what you think of the show. It means a lot to me and to prospective listeners. And thank you so much for listening, my friend. Stay well, and remember to keep your feet on the ground and your face to the sun.
On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thanks for listening. We have many free resources to support you on your health journey. Visit westonaprice.org to find podcasts, articles, videos, and more. You can also find a local chapter near you for help in finding sources of great food. We invite you to support the Foundation's mission of education, research, and activism by becoming a member. Thanks again, and take care. Wise Traditions is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. The content on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.